Well, welcome to our next project. Last time I walked you through one of our renovations, it was in a townhouse. Today's a little different. We're going in and we have a single family detached property. The economics are incredibly important. When you're dealing with something larger like this, the same basic principles come into effect. But I want to walk you through some of the different strategies that we wanted to ensure are going to make our project successful. Let's go in and let's check it out. Okay, tip number one, buy in a good community where there's a lot of resale activity. I mentioned it before, when you're coming back to market later with your completed project, you don't want to push the envelope too much. In a case like this, we're down here in Oak Ridge. Oak Ridge is just above the average sale prices. It can command a really strong resale price. Bigger project, as you can tell. Much more to be done than that townhouse I walked you through. In that townhouse, we completely changed everything. Here, we're gonna be doing about the same. So one would think, bigger project in this case, probably 3 times the renovation budget. Does that mean 3 times the risk? Well, I'm here to tell you it's not. When you do a few of the fundamentals right. One of the fundamentals is, again, buy right. You want to ensure when you purchase your property, there's enough margin built in so that you can take on a bit of risk, a few adjustments, because as you know, nothing's gonna go perfectly as planned. Okay, foundational tip number 2 to make sure your project goes well. Pick a property that has incredible bones. In a case like this has been a one-family property. It's been looked after, cared for, but you can see it needs some upgrades. When a property's been occupied by one family for a very long amount of time, they've had to stay and live and support the house along the way. So what does that mean? They've probably addressed some of the major issues, if there was some. And of course, when you're doing your analysis or you're doing your walkthrough, you're gonna look for those items anyways. But I knew that was a good sign for us. Tip number 3 on how to maximize your return and of course reduce your risk. Okay, you've got a little bit more play than that townhouse. When you've got a single family property like this, you can tell there's some different architectural elements. There's some things that I can add to this home that weren't here before. First and foremost, it just makes sense. I bet you're already thinking this. It's time to blow out this wall. Again, the comps in the area have shown that people have done this and have realized a really good final outcome. So this wall is going down. In order to stick to a budget and to not go way overzealous, which can easily happen, make sure your layouts are pretty conducive to what the buyers want today. In this case, we're gonna make some subtle changes, add a few structural beams, but for the most part, we're gonna stay to the bones that were already here. This is a key point to ensure that your budget will stay on track and keep you in the profit line, which I'm sure you're looking to achieve. You've probably heard this one before, uglier the better. Well, this is a little bit ugly. All littered through this house because of its original condition. We have really easy ways to improve, to bring it back to what the modern buyer wants. You hear this so often, location, location, location. But how about this one? Square footage, square footage, square footage. In this post-COVID emerging economy where we're trying to figure out how we can handle our financial positions, what do you think is going to matter to a lot of people today? It's value. So in a case like this, for a fairly reasonable dollar, we can add some well-needed square footage to this property. I'm really excited to offer this back to this layout when we get back to market. Okay, my final tip for the day. Well, it really has nothing to do with this bathtub, but I just thought I'd jump out. What's one tip to stay on budget and to stay on your timeline? Because as we all know, what? Time is money. In a case like this, we are working with a contractor we've worked with for over a decade. There's a lot of confidence in him and his abilities, but the structure that we've crafted for this deal has a fixed price, which is one. So he's got some risk, and I've potentially left maybe a little bit of money on the table as well to secure the earnings for him. But I'm comfortable with that number. Second to that is, if he completes it by a certain amount of time, the pricing's a little different. So there's a vested interest to do it at our pace, because as I go further along and I wait, I might miss the market. And as you can imagine, the cost of money isn't free. Okay, one oftentimes overlooked element when a renovation crew gets in or a flip project begins is the value that the buyers will place onto the exterior and their backyard space. When you put money into your landscaping, it's hard to get it all back. So the hope is you buy right so that the project you're taking on just requires a little bit of TLC to be able to get it up to standards, and it becomes a sought after piece of the house for a little bit of money, rather than the potential overlooked element and it becomes an eyesore and potential objection you have to handle later or throw further dollars into. Okay, well that's about it. I'm excited to get going. As you can tell, the demo's started. We've got more underway. This is gonna be a fast-paced project. I'm looking forward to updating you later on our success or maybe failure. I gotta get going. Back to work. Ooh. So today is what I call wrap-up day. Not on every listing do we end up doing a wrap-up, but this is our renovation project. So I get to put away our marketing materials, take these back, the ones that are still in good shape we'll reuse. And today, because it's our renovation project, I wanted to wrap up my thoughts, the notes we took, the wins we had, and share with you a little bit of the end result of this Flip This House project. I know when I've watched these shows on TV, not often do you get the full details. So today, I've made some notes to make sure I can pass along all the little tidbits I can about the wins and the things that just didn't work out, and I'll learn for next time. Okay, well let's start off with some of the real raw details of this home. We purchased this house off market through one of our realtors at the office. He is a wizard when it comes to finding people that need to get rid of their homes, and of course our solution worked out. So this home here in Oak Ridge was purchased at $350,000 all in. That was our starting point. The next step when you go through this is trying to figure out, well, that might be a good price, but you don't know until you have a better understanding of the final ARV, after repair value. You look around this house. Every time I'm in here, Ian and I, you're talking about this, we love the look of this house. The white, the black, the finishings. Honestly, it's quite easy to pull off a nice, new, fresh look. You don't have to be an expert to do that. I'm certainly not. I've got, you can employ designers. There's many more people than me that has an eye for the details that can make something look sexy. You gotta remember, the average person buying doesn't need the most impressive set of finishings and an interior designer standards, especially when you're pricing back a final repair value in an average community in and around the average prices. You don't have to be an expert when it comes to that. Now, if you want that little extra bit of oomph, you can of course hire designers. There's lots of people at a very affordable price that can provide you that insight if that's not your skill set. Okay, let's keep going. A couple of the things that you have to be mindful of are the big ticket items. In this case, when you come here, Ian, you may not be able to tell, but the windows are original. A lot of this house has been changed. The roof, eaves, of course the entire interior, the mechanical. But we chose as a risk to leave the windows, thinking that we weren't going to incur that $15,000 expense, and we also believed that that wouldn't be something that would cause any issue with sale. That risk paid off. Nobody really cared. It was kind of generally understood. But let's go up here. I'll show you about one risk we took that kind of affected our overall profit line. So this home is a 3-bedroom above grade. Pretty standard request from most buyers out there, whether they're bungalow buyers, 2-story buyers, and then in this case, a split level, okay? 3 bedrooms. The concern we had when buying was this. This is the master right here. And today's buyer, when they buy in the suburbs, guess what? There is always an ensuite. And if somebody's considering more of an inner city, or just the extension to the inner city, they want that. They want that. But we chose to say, well, we can't really do it in this property with the budget we had. So we chose against adding another full bathroom in around for the ensuite. That was a risk we took, thinking that the sexiness that comes from little design elements from some of the people we employed, the nice modern touches in a community that doesn't really have a ton of modern touches would be something buyers would overlook. They'd get used to not having an ensuite. So that decision to not put in an ensuite, that risk turned out to be one of the bigger issues with this. I personally did all the math when we ran the numbers for this property, the final ARV that we would be able to command. When I did that, and after seeing this finished product, I ended up launching $20,000 higher than my own personal suggestion. I got cocky because it looked so good and it turned out so well. Well, it turned out that we got tons of buzz. Nearly 35 to 40 sets of showings came through. And if you know our market, it's not that great. 35 to 40 showings, lots of interest, some almost offers, but nobody would bite. And it was this ensuite that kept coming back. So my lesson on this is don't get greedy, don't be cocky. Don't get cocky and aspirational, and play to what you know will be the risk that you're willing to take on. So that risk, once we adjusted price twice, brought in a buyer that for the value proposition that we offered, which is high, with that one issue being the ensuite, somebody was willing to overcome. And actually we had many people. Once we adjusted the price, I had 3 people waiting if my one buyer didn't pan out. So that's one of those risks that I would be mindful of next time. Now the last risk I want to talk about is this. We bought this house from an original homeowner. They had lived in this house 2 generations basically, and they were passing this on for the first time. We discussed what life was like living on this street. Very important. This is a drive. I would typically not suggest putting too much money into a drive because of the busyness. Now this drive was a little unique. Most people have already cut off of this drive by now. So the local residents know this. But for the average agent, showing houses to their client, considering this neighborhood, they don't realize that even though this is a drive, it's not very busy at all. But that didn't come through. And that became a comment that we would hear over and over again. And families were maybe a little concerned about this being a busy road. We know it's truly not. But for those who didn't know the community and the realtors that of course don't know every street, weren't able to kind of educate them on that. So that became an issue and people would pass. So those were some of the risks that we took on and win on the windows, lost on a couple of others. And ultimately, when we landed on our final profit, which I'll break down right here, ended up pretty darn close to where we started. Well, here's the part of the project where we get right down to brass tacks. This is where I can just point the exact specifics about how this project worked out from start to finish. So if you're a numbers person, if you're looking to figure out how do flippers make money, do they make money, and what's a typical project look and feel like? Well, you've seen it all, now let's get to the numbers. I mentioned over there, we bought this thing off market at $350,000. I also mentioned earlier in this video that buying right is the biggest skill that people need. It's not so much about the fixtures, it's the purchase price dictates mostly your profit. So for us, with a $350K purchase in our market, my goal is 8 to 10% of that initial purchase price is the profit that I'm looking to achieve. If I can get around that, I'm happy. It's not huge. This business takes volume to make real money. So the $350K purchase price, 8 to 10%, that's 35 grand at most net profit expectation, down a little bit from there. That was my goal, all right? So where did we end up? We've shaken this tree out. We're still adding up all the little extra costs that have come in. And it looks like today that we'll be right around that 30 to 32,000 will be the final profit. So yes, just slightly below that 10%. And if I knew my math, probably a little bit above that 8 that I said. So that's the numbers, but how did we get there? Okay, the final sale price of this beautiful home, as I put all this stuff away and I get ready to hand the keys over to an awesome new family. I'm really actually excited for them in this home because we put a lot into it. Was $508,500. So there's a spread there. It's a big number between $350 and $508,500, but yet we squeezed out about $30,000 in profit. Okay, our rental budget on this property was $80,000 for true hard renovation costs. In our case, I mentioned earlier that we did a fixed rate, a contract with our contractor, and we gave him a timeline to get this done within, that if he did it by then, then I would pay him that. If not, it might adjust and he would get paid less because time is money, which I'll describe. We added $4,500 for appliances. You have to, if you notice, there's no staging in here, but there was. So we had a $3,500 staging budget built in. You also need to purchase and sell. So there's legal costs on the way in and on the way out. In this case, off market, we didn't have a true RPR that was compliant. So I had to build the RPR price into it. Now, if you're buying on the MLS, you're typically going to get a compliant RPR. But if you're a flipper and a renovator, you're often buying at a discount. So sometimes you don't get that. In this case, we didn't. And then for us, of course, there's some little incidentals around the marketing costs. Producing this video, making the feature sheets, the design, the ads we created to push this out and get it sold and get as many eyeballs on it as possible. All that comes into play. You want to make sure your spreadsheet, as simple as it is, just identifies all those elements. Now, the other thing is you have to be mindful of that maybe you don't realize. Insurance on a home when you're doing a renovation that isn't occupied is much more expensive than the house that you and I live in. So make sure you're gonna do that. In our case, I think the monthly amount was somewhere around 3 to 4x what I normally spend on my own house. So, okay, check with your insurance provider before that. Well, you have to ensure that the timeline it's gonna take to renovate is realistic. The carrying costs monthly is all pulled in. That's utilities, insurance, property taxes, mortgage payments, line of credit. And in our case, which we often do, we have hard money lenders that support portions of the cost to purchase the home, renovate the home. So in our case, we had some hard money. Somewhere around 10 to 12% is typical, at least in our market, where you would pay somebody or you'd internally pay yourself if you happen to be one of the partnerships, and you can earn money while your money is tied up in the home and going through the renovations. Be careful, because time is money. When you're paying 10 and 12% to a significant portion of your purchase and acquisition price, that number will add up. Make sure you have it in there. In our case, the way we hack that a little bit is, as soon as we have additional capital that we have laying around, we'll cut out the 10 to 12% money as fast as possible to cut the monthly carrying costs. And generally I do that when I know there's a firm sale, and then I move my own personal monies around or with my partners as best as possible to ensure I can cut that cost to carry as much as I can. So there you have it. Those are the things. I know when I watch HTTV, oftentimes you don't get those details. You don't get the specifics. So 508, 500, 350, shake out the tree, re-watch this and go through the math, and you'll see we landed in around that 30 to 32,000. Now the one cost I didn't talk about, and this is one thing I try to do more of every chance I have, is there's a cost on sale that's also a pretty significant one, which is of course realtors' commissions. So in my spreadsheet, I have a commissions owed based on max ARV, the max after repair value that I think I'm gonna sell for, and there's a buyer commission. I'm in real estate, so I don't have to charge myself a commission, but my brokerage earns a few pennies off me as I close a deal. So in our case, I don't have two commissions to pay. If you did, because you have to employ somebody to serve and sell your property, if you're not an agent yourself, you have to factor that in and make sure that that's into your numbers. If you are hiring agents, which is of course, that's the reason 98% of the homes that trade with agents, is because we know what we're doing. But you have an opportunity as a homeowner going through the flip process to build some urgency around your property, to canvass the neighborhood, to put up some coming soon messaging, and maybe curate your own buyer on the way in. So if I wanted to save a bunch more money, and one thing I probably will do if I have enough time on the next project, would be to do much more coming soon in advance of marketing. So that if I can save that cash by selling it myself on the front end before I go to open market and open myself up to all 5,000 agents and their endless client lists, that could save you a little bit too. Well, that's really about it. You've been taken through the initial stages of this project, showcase the final product, fully staged, all the lipstick and all the bells and whistles clean and shiny. I've now brought you through all the dirty details of what it's like and the costs involved. This whole project, it took 3.5 months to renovate. It took 2.5 months from list date to where the final possession will take. So this one little project, my math is right, that's half of the year to squeeze out that little $30-ish thousand if all said and done. So if the idea of renovating, oh, I got to get the light, properties is for you, just know you've got a little bit more info now to make your judgments. This isn't an easy business. I'm in this business, and I have to strategically handpick these, especially in our market, to make sure I don't end up losing my shirt or spending 6 months just to return all the money I had and not have a profit at all. So I'm gonna wrap up. If you've got questions about how to do this, if you'd like a sit down, I'm happy to discuss and go into the details, open up my spreadsheet, and help you analyze these projects along the way. It's a lot of fun, it's a lot of stress, but hopefully you enjoyed this video and it provided a ton of education into the behind the scenes of what it's like to flip that house. Well, I'll catch you on the next one.